Good evening. I'd like to call the Mequon Municipal Water Utility Commission meeting of October 27th to order. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Strelchuk is absent. Commissioner Bushy is absent. Commissioner Meyer?
Here.
Commissioner Hancher?
Here.
Commissioner Garrell?
Here.
Commissioner Parrish?
Here.
Commissioner Schneider? Here. And Commissioner Nervin?
Here. First up, we have approval of the minutes from our last meeting on August 10th.
Move approval.
Moved. Second. Motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Next up, we've got several discussion and possible action items. I'm looking for a motion to suspend the rules to take up item G, the Village of River Hills request for water service first, since I see a few officials from University School of Milwaukee in the audience, and I don't want to make them wait till the end of our meeting. So if someone would make that motion in a second.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we can take up that matter now first. So maybe staff give it a quick intro. I don't know if Kristen or Jim's going to give the...
I can. We were originally going to be before you tonight with some draft language for the intergovernmental agreement, water services agreement, so that you could otherwise review and consider the further discussion on the terms and conditions should you otherwise decide that we would expand the user service area to serve the Village of River Hills. As I was literally finishing the memo, we received an email from River Hills indicating that the university schools connection was in question, and they were requesting a meeting to have a review of the pro forma absent university school. And I otherwise understand that they may want to give an update as their position was otherwise represented.
Correct. I think, does anyone from University School want to speak on the matter as to their level of interest? Sure, just come to the podium. We know Greg Bach. Greg Bach's on our planning commission as an alternate, but maybe give your address as well for the record.
Yes, Greg Bach, 12641 North River Forest Circle. River Forest Circle, there's a home with 12641 on River Forest Drive with the same address. We get all their pizzas and But thanks for letting us chat a little bit on this project, just so we can give the school's position. As some of you probably know, I after 37 years retired from university school last year, but the school's asked me to stay on for some projects, and this is one of them because I've been working on this project for 2 years for the school. So I thought it'd be great, since we saw our name in the packet, just to give you some information. There's been a lot of communication issues, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Just so you know, the school is served by 2 wells, plus a secondary fire pond, and then there's a 50,000-gallon cistern on campus with one of the construction projects in 2010 that was required by the fire department. So there's a lot of well and fire protection infrastructure in the school. As a matter of fact, North Shore Fire wanted the entire school to be sprinkled. That was a 5-year project. We just finished last year, but the school spent about $2.5 to $3 million just on that. So a lot of money has been put in on infrastructure. As I said, I've been working on this project for about 2 years, and it's a big project. I think a Village of River Hills engineer, came to the school with this kind of initial request about possibly asking for an easement and putting an 8-inch line on the west side of our campus. And we were intrigued, so we began to study some of the options. It should be clear that USM is and continues to be interested in converting to city water, but there is a need to understand all of the financial implications. And I think we made that clear in the June packet that was submitted. I put a letter in there, and I think that it said that the school was very interested, but we had some financial issues to go through, and those are still there. The school is prepared, and I spent 2 years working with the school to sell them on this, and so everybody is pretty much up to speed, other than this financial part. The school is already prepared to pay the estimated $40,000 annual Mequon water bill. So that was based on, I think 2017, 2018, and 2019 water usage in the campus. So from that, at least with working with our engineers, it looks like it would be about $40,000 a year. The school's prepared to pay for that. School's also prepared to spend $200,000 for the needed internal water conversion. That's what it's going to, we estimated it's going to cost the school. We got pretty hard numbers on that. That includes fire protection conversion, the plumbing, the electrical. The questions that we have are, one, the lateral costs, okay? So we've got some preliminary estimates from our engineers. It started at 250,000, and then it was up to 300, and then it was 350,000. But I don't have any firm numbers on that, on what that actual lateral cost will be. So we need some more work on that. Then, during this whole discussion with River Hills, we moved to put in a 12-inch lateral was needed, or 12-inch main was needed to handle the fire protection needs, the pressure for the fire protection. We never talked about the school paying for any of that in any of the discussions. And so I'll come to that in a second, but the village, I think, may be expecting USM to pay for that as well. And then other village costs. You know, are there other village costs? So we don't know any of those things. In April, the school sent a letter to the village asking if they would be willing to pay for the lateral connection for the school. We really want to make this kind of a win-win. So we put in a request to say, hey, could you help the school with this cost? And we never got a response. In June, we attended this meeting, and we chatted with the village staff on the steps after the meeting, and they said, hey, okay, great, we're ready to talk. We're ready to talk. Again, I heard nothing in June, July, or August. Finally, I heard from the new village president, Chris Noyes, in September asking for a meeting on October 7th. I assumed it was going to be a response to my letter that we sent in April. I learned at that meeting that he had not even seen that letter. Apparently that letter was lost with another school submission, and they never saw the letter. So he was surprised at my request and said, the village really is not in a position to help with that lateral cost. So I sent a follow-up email reiterating the school's request. It was acknowledged, but there was not a response. I did get a call from a village president, Chris Noyes, saying that the village was prepared to move forward without USM. I said, Chris, now he was new in his position. I said, you probably should check with Mequon first, because everything that I have heard, and even at that last June meeting, was that USM is an important partner in this project. He said, great, 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 but I don't know who to call. So I gave him the engineer's name and the administrator, water administrator's name, and asked him to call and said, get back to me. So then I haven't heard anything. I think he's out of the country, and now this meeting was scheduled, and I was never notified, and USM is in the report. I assume that information came from Chris, because he's the only one that I have been communicating with directly. I know the village engineer has been very involved in this project, but I don't know who is actually communicating about, but there certainly was not some factual information in that letter. So that's my point. It seems that there's been some communication issues. USM has always had a great relationship with the village, and we want to continue to have that relationship. We want to make this work to create a win-win for all parties. But basically, we need a proposal from the village with all the infrastructure costs, hopefully an offer to help with some of those costs. And then once I have that information, I can take it to the school's finance committee, and they can give their quick blessing on it. But if I don't have anything and we don't know the cost for some of these things, it's really hard to present that to the school, to the finance committee, to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. So that's the school's position. We're ready, but we just need to I think, get everybody on the same page. Happy to take questions. Our engineers are here also from Grafe, so if anybody has an engineering question, they're here as well.
I just might want to make a couple notes. Number one, of course, this is difficult at this stage, being conceptual, but otherwise needing to move forward, because we've requested pro forma, but the Mequon Water Utility has not yet said yes to serving River Hills. So we were still trying to work through the terms and agreements for a connection and are not yet at the stage of saying yes and or considering what the terms of connection are. We did request the financial pro forma that essentially was trying to determine if this single residential development could provide the revenue to otherwise serve its replacement costs, which it showed that it did not. And the updated pro forma included the university school, which then showed that it would. So that is the stage that we were otherwise at. But we were just starting to work through, again, what those terms and conditions were for the connection. Things like what you've heard before about requiring the secondary connection under I-43, the upsizing of the main, and other requirements that would be made from our perspective, at least, to provide for good water utility infrastructure. But in terms of the actual financials, obviously we haven't been a part of that, nor would we for most developments. The utility operates on a build and contribute basis. We would also be interested in having a conversation with USM to make sure they're making the best decisions in terms of how their campus should be served, and maybe even with the North Shore Fire Department. Did I say that correct?
Yep.
Because we think there may be benefits from them being served by a public main rather than by a service lateral. And that would certainly change elements of the project as well. So we would be happy to be invited into any of the conversations about what makes sense. We were really just trying to get together some of the terms and conditions for this body to make sure that we were going in the right direction for you to ultimately make the decision as to whether the answer is going to be yes or no to serving River Hills.
Yeah, so to recap where we were in June, we had agreed that we would be open to considering it if the financial pro forma made sense and we could pull the elements of the plan together, and then it just seems like things have fallen apart and gotten communications a little fractured. They've had some turnover at River Hills. So I'm going to suggest, we were not going to make a decision here tonight, but it seems like this project needs a reset. I propose that we, city water, lead that discussion, bring all the parties together so we can get on the same page, because I think River Hills has an idea of what they can do, and USM's still interested. There's some disagreement at that level between those two parties. We really need to get everyone together and hammer out what's reality here, so we can get on the same page, because at this pace we'll get nowhere. And I think the utility's eager to help out, but even they're not in the middle of some of these conversations. So if we can orchestrate such a meeting in the next couple of weeks and get those all three parties together, that'd be my recommendation, and we can come back and discuss this with knowing some real facts, maybe in a couple of weeks or a month, or I guess it'd be December if it's not in a couple of weeks. So I don't know what others feel about that. I'm sure there's other questions. We can field them on this issue. I know there's a proposal by River Hills that maybe there would be an alternate way to make the pro forma work out.
Correct.
That we've never contemplated before. Maybe some of the questions would center around that.
Correct. All I would add is that they did. They indicated that the River Hills would make the pro forma work, and if it wasn't with USM, that they would make a financial contribution so that it would otherwise make sense for the utility.
And I've got some questions on that, but I won't do all the talking.
We didn't get any further than that.
Commissioner Parrish had his hand up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Quick one. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I totally agree with staff's approach, and I think we support you in your approach as you move forward with River Hills. And as far as picking up the pace or being behind schedule, I'm perfectly satisfied with this pace. I mean, I'd rather the strategic plan be done for the water utility before we even make these decisions, but we were trying to accommodate.
It will be.
Yeah, so River Hills. So at this pace, I think this is great. And as usual, to our water utility staff, keep up the good work.
And I'm not looking to shove this along quickly, but we're consuming staff time working on it, and if things aren't organized, we're in essence wasting our time. And I'm not saying it's been a waste, but we got to bring people together quickly so we're making meaningful progress if this is going to go forward. And nothing will probably happen quickly. There's not even a set of plans to look at.
Correct, and again, they're welcome to, but there probably wouldn't be again until we define those terms and conditions, because they're going to ultimately want to know what either we as water utility staff or you as commissioners are going to require of them in order to make that yes, which hasn't ultimately been rendered at this point.
Any other comments or questions on this item? I've got one. It's general, and you probably haven't thought it all the way through yet, but I don't think we've considered ever using such a model where an entity that didn't otherwise make sense on a pro forma basis would essentially buy in on the maintenance costs. Do we have a method of calculating that? What's the risk in calculating that? It seems like we'd be projecting what interest rates would be over a very long period of time to try and figure out the net present value of the revenue deficit that would make that be not upside down. I don't know if you've got any, it's essentially that.
I was going to say, if you recall, it was about a week, so this is fresh to us as well. So I'm not sure we've had the opportunity to think through all of the logistics, but yes to the idea that we would be looking at exactly as you described, essentially the revenue deficit from the ultimate replacement cost, given the proposed connections at the time of development, and determining what the deficit is, and then requesting that as a lump sum payment. And I must also say that would have been something we would have brought to the commission. I mean, this wasn't anything that we determined made sense or that we would recommend, or
it's just
that
a status
we were
update.
even prepared to ask you to consider, because it was very late, as we were otherwise trying to bring, again, some of the terms and conditions as to what it may look like, assuming the project was as previously assumed, that included both the residential development and university.
Okay, so not prepared to make a comment on that. That's fine. I didn't expect so, but any other comments or questions, or would we like to move on? There's no decision to make here. It's just a status update. I'll take the silence as we're ready to move on. So let me know if I can make that meeting. I'll come, Jim. So let's just coordinate and try and make that happen.
Okay.
When people are able. I know it's
Sounds good.
getting into the busy season for people, but we'll try and make it happen. All right, back onto our normal. Thank you for those from USM for showing up and letting us know your position. Back onto the regular agenda here. Next up, we have a approval request for an exemption from the Mequon Municipal Water Utilities Connection Policy for the property located at 7625 West Mequon Road. Maybe a brief staff report.
Sure, I'll take this one. So there's Primus Companies is looking to build a veterinary clinic at 7625. About a decade ago, the Legend Court Townhomes developed, and at the time the DOT was talking about reconstructing the intersection at Mequon Road and 76th Street. And they were talking about roundabouts, and so there was a lot of confusion over how much area was going to be disturbed, and what would need to be relocated due to that. So the water main was run through an easement to get to the Legend Court Townhomes. So now there's water main all the way around this property of 7625 West Mequon Road, and every other property could be served by existing infrastructure. So the Primus Companies came to us requesting an exemption to extend a water main across their entire frontage. And for us, it makes sense, seeing as no one to the east of them or beyond them would ever need a main extension to be served. So we're on board with that exemption.
Okay, any comments or questions from the commissioners? If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve the exemption.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments, questions? Not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes. Oh, it's recommended onto the council. Oh, passes. No, we're able to make our own decisions here. Next, we have consideration of an amendment for the Mequon Municipal Water Utilities water connection policy related to calculation of water connection fees. Who wants to give this one? Kristen? Kristen, take it away.
Sure. I first want to clarify that this is not a proposed change to the fee itself. That is otherwise set by tariff and memorialized in our fee schedule. It does have a volumetric component to it that we wanted to define the methodology for which that is calculated. And so it goes through a series of metrics. The first would be that if the applicant has any other similar locations, that we would be using actual volumetric data that we could otherwise average to apply our connection fee calculation. That if there is not one, that we would otherwise look for similar customers within the utility to compare their volumetric data for. And if there's not a similar use, that we would use industry standards. For commercial development, there's a conversion to resident equivalent units, and there are lots of agencies that have tables that are otherwise utilized to establish equivalent residential units for that calculation. So we're proposing an amendment to include that so that it will be clear and concise for applicants as to how that fee is calculated.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Okay. Any further comments? Once, twice? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And that measure passes. Next we're on to item C. Okay, approval of a Mequon Municipal Water Utility Financial Policy regarding reserve requirements. You, Kristen, again?
I'll start, but I have backup, so,
Okay.
In case I otherwise need it. The Mequon Water Utility staff is requesting consideration of the establishment of a policy to address minimum reserve requirements for what's designated in the budget as unassigned funds. You may recall that the water utility was established via referendum, which strictly states that no city funds can ultimately be used to support the utility, and therefore there have been some stringent standards that have otherwise been put on the utility to ensure that it can remain self-funding, including some requirements on the initial borrowing that was utilized to purchase the utility. Since the utility has evolved, the dollar value of the unassigned funds has otherwise accumulated, and so we're requesting permission to set a minimum reserve. Now, of course, there being a minimum, we wouldn't otherwise necessarily indicate that we would use every penny in excess of that, but we would otherwise consider being able to reallocate those if it's well in excess of the minimum reserves, as the commission would otherwise approve for capital projects, as an example. So we're looking to establish the policy so that we could otherwise go through and evaluate the dollar amount against that policy and make recommendations accordingly. The threshold as otherwise proposed at this point is 80% or a minimum of $2 million. Depending on the commission's view on that, we were still trying to be fiscally conservative, and we'd be happy to review that again in the future if the commission so desired.
Are there any questions? This is actually a good news story that we can talk about having a reserve with this utility, because that a few short years ago that wasn't even a conversation we could have. When I looked at the memo and tried to rationalize the 80%, I did a little bit of research and found some data supporting, somewhat supporting that the number. It seems like a large number, but the way bonding agencies look at utilities, there was some data out there for those with AA or AAA ratings. They had almost 2 years of operating income in reserve. AA was about 1.5 years, and single A was roughly 85%. So if the utility wanted to borrow money and have an A rating, that'd be right about the right reserve amount to have for a bond agency to look at it and grade them in that way. And that's a median value, so there's some above, there's some below, but it's pretty close to the median value. I was trying to figure out why is 80% the right number. So I don't know what went into the calculus, but when I did my own independent research, that's what I found. So it makes sense to have a reserve. We need to keep this separate from city finances by our own ordinance, and we would want to anyway. So we need to have some sort of policy. I think it's prudent to have it. Just have to decide what the right amount is. Commissioner Schneider.
I'm just curious to Mayor Durbin's question or comment. How did you arrive at the number that you thought would be appropriate as a reserve?
With significant assistance from the finance department, but we essentially went through some iterations of seeing how much money it would otherwise be based upon the current expenses in comparison to what previous requirements have been, and some maybe both industry standards and rules of thumb in terms of financing and how many years, or how many months worth of expenses you should otherwise keep in reserve should there be catastrophic issues. As noted, unlike both the sewer utility and the general levy budget, the water utility is not supported by levy, so it is strictly based on user fees. And so we wanted to be sure that we were trying to be conservative enough that we could cover costs if there was an issue that rose, but not so restrictive that we were on paper appearing to overcharge our ratepayers for money that is not ultimately utilized by the utility.
Thank you.
And that's an important distinction. If an emergency happens in the city and we incur costs above our reserve, we can just levy for it. But the water utility doesn't have that flexibility. So if something bad happened, you didn't have money laying around, you'd have to spike rates up, maybe one time for a few years to pay for it, but it could add to rate volatility by not having cash on hand.
And just to note, it is truly the unassigned. We obviously also have capital balances, which we also didn't used to have. So the water utility is also healthier in not only having this unassigned reserve at a value that we can be considering policy, but we also have capital reserves that we don't spend out to zero every year. That if there was a catastrophic event, we could request reallocation otherwise.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? If not, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, do we need roll call on this or no? Quasi-monetary?
I don't think it's required on this.
Well, we'll do it. We'll do it anyway. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Nurbin.
Aye. And that motion passes. Next, we have award for a contract at Mequon Municipal Water Utility Master Plan update to the City Water LLC, an amount not to exceed $35,000. Do we need a report? I think we talked about this maybe at the last meeting. It's just coming to fruition now. Are there any questions for staff? If not, Alderman
Make a
Parrish?
motion to-
Commissioner Parrish.
Thank you. Make a motion to approve the water utility contract for the strategic plan, the master plan.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, please also call the roll on that item.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
Commissioner Garrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Nurbin,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer.
Aye.
That passes. Looking forward to the results. Many of us are. Next up, we have the adoption of the fiscal year 2023 Mequon Water Utility Budget. This one definitely deserves a short presentation. Take it away, Mr. Boyd.
This is the 2023 Mequon Water Utility Budget. Analysis for what we've done over the 2022 accomplishments. In October, 14th of 2022, we added roughly 33 customers. We're up to 4,704 utility customers. We've continued to maintain the system, flushing hydrants, turning valves. We've also had several infrastructure projects in 2022. A lot of the I-43 projects where we, had the work up at Highland Road, the work down on County Line Road, as I'm sure you guys have all seen going about as if you drive up and down the freeway or Port Road. We've also done several residential developments, the 200 Green in Thiensville, Phase 2 of Woods at Highland Park, Foxtown Townhomes on Bunt Rock, and they are currently working on the Green by Vilda Park. So there's been a lot of construction going on in the system. For 2023, we're looking at continuing the meter replacements. Also, more of the developments, the Swan Ridge development is being contemplated. The Green at Mequon, like I said, they're currently constructing. Homestead High School and Enclave Phase 6. We'll continue to do water meter replacements, and then also just wanted to note that Milwaukee Water Works is continuing to work on their rate case. We've brought this to your attention several years in a row. It's been a long process, but they're still working on it. We anticipate that they should have that finalized sometime within the next 6 to 12 months. So we'll wait to see what happens there and with North Shore Water Commission, and we'll bring that to your attention once we know what those rate increases will be. But our rates are projected to be flat until we hear otherwise from either Milwaukee or North Shore. So we continue to carry a flat rate, and the only hiccup in the reserve for capital projects in 2021, I think you would notice that there was a negative $1 million, and then in 2022 that bounced back. That was the I-43 projects where we were required to construct the projects, pay our contractors, and then the DOT paid us back 90% of that cost. And there was a gap there between us paying the contractors and then receiving the money from the DOT for that work. So that was the negative $1 million that we carried from 2021, and then it disappeared in 2022. It was the DOT projects.
Didn't know you were a bank for the state.
Yeah, right? So that is the update.
Thank you. Any question from the commissioners? No questions is good, I guess. Okay. You just didn't want to raise your hand. Commissioner Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Mine's on page 29 of the packet. We're on the water capital project budget right now, right? The first question relates to you're proposing a $400,000 AMI metering system. Sounds like that's what you're funding the account with. My question is, what is that, and what's the benefit to Mequon? Then I have another question.
So, that's under the utility financing fund, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, what that is it's automatic metering infrastructure. If you recall, we brought, when we switched meter reading technologies to the Riva radios it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we had brought a study to you that contemplated these new Riva radios. And those radios have the ability to migrate to what's called a fixed base network. So instead of currently, what we end up doing is we have to drive around in a utility van once every 90 days to collect meter reads. And you only get that snapshot in time. So once every 90 days, you'll find out what the customers consumed for water, but in between, there's no idea as to what's going on. The fixed base network, it uses those same exact radios that we're installing currently, but we install antennas. They'll do a propagation study. It'll tell us how many antennas we need to install. But then once those antennas are installed, then they can read the meters daily, and you can get hourly reads on the meters, so we know exactly what's going on. It allows the utility to do things like we'll find out whether or not a customer's meter has been running for 24 hours constantly. So we'll know if a customer has a leak. So you can notify that customer that there is a leak in their home somewhere versus waiting 90 days and now they have a $600 bill.
Are you buying it this year though, or is this?
No,
just,
no.
Okay, all right.
No.
So I don't need to get much
Okay.
further into that then. Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry about that. Yes, this is
Seemed like a big expense that maybe we were buying this year, so I was asking about it.
right. That's just one of the
Thank you.
optional.
And then my second question was, looks like we have a $587,000 payment to Thiensville.
Yes.
Can you just elaborate what that is quick? And is it a one-time payment or recurring, or what is that?
Yes, that was in exchange for the sewer service for the woods at Highland Park. So the betterment of service project on Division that otherwise went through was paid for by Thiensville, but it's ultimately a Mequon water utility expense. So we have until December 31st of 2023 to make that payment.
It was a loop that benefited all of our customers. At the time, Thiensville, when they were building and doing the sewer work up at the woods at Highland Park, they were looking for some sort of a project, and we had this project that we had identified as a critical system loop. So this was something that every customer benefited from because it provides a main backbone 12-inch water main that runs through Thiensville and gets us around the rivers.
It was a part of that intergovernmental agreement that was signed when we.
Okay. So we were already planning on it, and it's one time.
One time.
One time.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Move approval.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all those, well, Commissioner Meyer.
Nothing really major. It's Bun Truck, not Bun Rock.
Oh, yeah.
The name of it is Bun Truck.
We'll have that corrected. I have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Garrell,
Aye.
Commissioner Parrish,
Aye.
Commissioner Schneider,
Aye.
Commissioner Nervin,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Hi.
Commissioner Hancher.
Aye. Next up, we have authorization of the 2023 water meter purchase for 250 meters and associated appurtenances.
Second.
All right. It's a new one. We need a motion first. Is there a motion? I just stuttered over the last word. Second. Caught me off guard. A motion and a second. Any comments or questions on this one? If not, please call the roll.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Schneider.
Aye.
Commissioner Nervin,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hancher,
Aye.
and Commissioner Garrell.
Aye.
And that motion passes. Good luck with the water meters. Lastly, we have residences at Foxtown water service valve failures. It's just a status update for the commission on the current situation over with the townhomes. I don't know, is Jim or Kristen?
Yes, both.
Both?
So we've identified an issue. Unfortunately, we're concerned that it's widespread and could impact all of the units, if not the majority of the units. It appears at this point as though it may be a manufacturer defect, so they did come to retrieve a portion of the material that had otherwise broken off on one of the valves while we were trying to shut off service for the irrigation contractor to make a connection. So we're not looking for action, we're just looking to otherwise advise you of the issue. Unfortunately, because of the final plat process, that portion of the system has been dedicated to the water utility. We are past the 1-year warranty, but we are pursuing conversations with both the manufacturer and the contractor to see if we can determine ultimately what the source of the failure is. This is decades before it should otherwise have failed. So, and we have another location with a very similar development that we're not seeing failures. So we're just trying to do our due diligence at this point to discover what the issue actually is, and then assuming that there needs to be any action from this commission, we would be back before you requesting that.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's kind of valves that are only a year or two old. breaking and causing you not to be able to shut off the water is a bit of a problem. Better to deal with it now than when people are inhabiting all those buildings. All right. Thank you for the updates. I think that brings us to the end of this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned as the Water Utility Commission, and